He turned to the Duchess, his voice thick with betrayal. "He paid me back well, did he not? I was young, madly in love, impetuous, yet I never crushed the boy. You have today made me the same requital for my pity as your lover made for my trust in him. Well, things remain just as they were 20 years ago, excepting that the time for pity is past. And I will repeat what I said to you then, forget your son, and he shall live." Mademoiselle de Vaudry's voice trembled with indignation. "And shall her sufferings during those 20 years count for nothing? A great crime calls for a great atonement," the Duke replied, unmoved. The Duchess's eyes flashed with defiance, her voice ringing with conviction. "Ah, if you take my grief for a sign of remorse, I will again protest to you, I am innocent." "No. Langeac never betrayed your confidence. It was not for his king alone he went to his death, and from the fatal day on which he bade me farewell and surrendered me to you, I have never seen him again." The Duke's face twisted with scorn. "You purchased the life of your son by making an exactly contrary declaration. Can a compact dictated by terror be looked upon as an avowal of guilt?" the Duchess countered, her voice steady despite the storm within her. "Do you intend to give that certificate of birth?" the Duke demanded. "It is no longer in my possession," she replied, her tone resolute. The Duke's eyes narrowed, his voice cold as steel. "I will no longer answer then for your son's safety." "Have you weighed well the consequences of this threat?" the Duchess asked, her gaze unwavering. "You ought to know me by this time," he said, his words a chilling promise. The Duchess drew herself up, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "The trouble is that you do not know me. You will no longer answer for my son's safety? Indeed, but you had better look after your own son. Albert is a guarantee for the life of Fernand. If you keep watch on my proceedings, I shall set a watch on yours. If you rely upon the police of the realm, I have resources of my own, and the assistance of God. If you deal a blow at Fernand, beware of what may happen to Albert. A blow for a blow. That is final." The Duke's face paled, his composure faltering. "You are in our own house, madam," he said, his voice softening with forced civility. "I forgot myself. Pray pardon me. I was wrong." The Duchess's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. "You are more a gentleman than your son. When he flies into a rage, he begs no one's pardon, not he." The Duke stood silent, his thoughts a tumult of doubt and calculation. Has her resignation up to this time been nothing but a pretense? He wondered. Has she been waiting for the present opportunity to speak? Women who are guided by the advice of bigots travel underground, like volcanic fires, and only reveal themselves when they break out. She knows my secret. I have lost sight of her son, and my defeat is imminent. Without another word, he turned and strode from the room, his heavy steps echoing in the silence. The Duchess stood motionless, her heart pounding with the weight of her defiance. In the Montsorel mansion, where every word was a weapon and every secret a chain, she had cast down the gauntlet. The battle for her son's life, and her own honor, had begun, and she would fight with the ferocity of a mother scorned, against a husband whose pride was both his strength and his undoing. The Montsorel mansion salon, with its gilded mirrors and heavy damask curtains, stood as a silent witness to the machinations that unfolded within its walls. The morning light filtered through the windows, casting pale shadows that seemed to mimic the duplicity of the household. The Duc de Montsorel paced the room, his florid face set in a mask of determination, his mind a labyrinth of suspicion and strategy. "Joseph," he commanded, his voice low but authoritative, "I am not at home excepting to one person. If he comes, you will show him up. I refer to Monsieur de Saint Charles. Find out whether your mistress will see me." Joseph, the footman whose servility masked a wary heart, bowed and withdrew, leaving the Duke alone with his thoughts. The Duke's eyes narrowed as he reflected on the previous night's confrontation with his wife. The awakening of a maternal instinct, which I thought had been utterly extinguished in her heart, amazes me beyond measure, he mused. The secret struggle in which she is engaged must at once be put a stop to. Louise's resignation had once made their life tolerable, but her newfound defiance threatened to unravel the fragile truce they had maintained. Abroad, he had controlled her through surveillance and intimidation, but in France, his power rested on subtler tools, cunning manipulation and the veneer of authority. "I shall tell everything to the king," he resolved. "I shall submit myself to his dictation, and Madame de Montsorel must be compelled to submit." Yet he knew he must proceed with caution. The detective, St. Charles, if as skilled as reputed, would uncover the truth behind Louise's rebellion, whether she was deceived by a mere resemblance or had indeed found her lost son. The Duke's agents had lost track of the boy 12 years ago, a fact that now gnawed at him. "I was very much excited last night," he admitted to himself. "I must be more discreet. If I keep quiet, she will be put off her guard and reveal her secrets." Joseph re-entered, his expression deferential. "Her Grace the Duchess has not yet rung for her maid." "Very well," the Duke replied, dismissing him with a wave. As Joseph retreated, the Duke's gaze fell upon the table, where a book lay open among scattered papers. To justify his presence in his wife's private salon, he began to inspect the items, his fingers brushing against a letter tucked within the book's pages. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the address, to Mademoiselle Inez de Christoval. His brow furrowed. Why should my wife have concealed a letter of such slight importance? He wondered. She no doubt wrote it after our quarrel. Is it concerning Raoul? This letter must not go to the Christoval house. His suspicions deepened, the letter a potential key to his wife's clandestine plans. At that moment, Felicite, the Duchess's chambermaid, entered, a youthful face betraying a flicker of anxiety as she approached the table. Her eyes darted to the book, searching for the letter she had been tasked to deliver. "Now, where is that letter of Madame's?" she muttered, her voice tinged with frustration. "Can she have forgotten it?" The Duke's voice cut through her thoughts, smooth but laced with intent. "Aren't you looking for a letter?" Felicite started, her cheeks flushing. "Yes, Your Grace." "Isn't this it?" he asked, holding up the letter with a calculated smile. "The very one, Your Grace," she replied, her tone cautious. The Duke's eyes narrowed, his voice taking on a faintly reproachful edge. "It is astonishing that you should leave the very hour your mistress must need your services." "She is getting up." Felicite curtsied, her composure regained. "Her Grace the Duchess has Thais, and besides, I am going out by her orders." "Very good," the Duke said, his tone dismissive. "I did not wish to interfere with you." As Felicite moved to leave, the door opened, and Joseph ushered in a man whose sharp features and calculating gaze marked him as an outsider to the mansion's polished world. Blondit, alias the Chevalier de St. Charles, strode forward, his eyes locking briefly with Joseph's in a silent exchange of mutual suspicion. Joseph's face tightened. "The look of that man is very distasteful to me," he thought, retreating to the shadows. The Duke gestured for St. Charles to approach, his gaze appraising the man's nondescript yet confident demeanor. St. Charles handed him a letter, his thoughts guarded. Does he know my antecedents, or will he simply recognize me as St. Charles? He wondered. "My dear sir," the Duke began. "I am to be merely St. Charles," the detective interjected, his voice low and assured. The Duke nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You are recommended to me as a man whose ability, if it had fair scope, would be called genius." St. Charles inclined his head, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "If His Grace the Duke will give me an opportunity, I will prove myself worthy of that flattering opinion. You shall have one at once, the Duke replied, his tone brisk. What are your commands? St. Charles asked, his posture alert. The Duke's gaze flicked toward Felicite, who lingered near the door, the letter now in her possession. You see that maid, he said. She is going to leave the house. I do not wish to hinder her doing so, yet she must not cross the threshold until she receives a fresh order. He called out, Felicite. Felicite turned, her expression wary. What is it, Your Grace? The Duke handed her the letter, his eyes never leaving her face. She curtsied and exited, the letter clutched tightly in her hand. St. Charles turned to Joseph, his voice low and menacing. I recognize you. I know all about you. See that this maid remains in the house with the letter, and I will not recognize you, will know nothing of you, and will let you stay here so long as you behave yourself. Joseph's heart sank, his mind racing. This fellow on one side, and Jacques Collin on the other. He thought, his loyalty torn between two predators. Well, I must try to serve them both honestly. With a nod, he slipped out in pursuit of Felicite, his steps heavy with the weight of his predicament. The Duke and St. Charles stood alone, the salon's opulence a stark contrast to the sordid game of espionage unfolding within it. The Duke's mind churned with plans to quell his wife's rebellion, while St. Charles, ever the opportunist, sensed the chance to prove his worth. In the Montsorel mansion, where trust was a luxury none could afford, the threads of deceit tightened, binding master, servant, and spy in a web that threatened to ensnare them all. In the opulent yet stifling salon of the Montsorel mansion, the Duc de Montsorel faced the Chevalier de St. Charles, the air between them charged with unspoken calculations. The morning light glinted off the gilded mirrors, casting sharp reflections that seemed to underscore the detective's piercing gaze. St. Charles stood with a practiced air of deference, but his eyes betrayed a mind as sharp and unrelenting as a blade. The Duke, his florid face composed but wary, regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and caution, sensing the dangerous potential of the man before him. Your Grace's commands are obeyed, St. Charles began, his voice smooth and assured. Do you wish to know the contents of the letter? The Duke's eyebrows rose, a flicker of unease crossing his features. Why, my dear sir, the power you seem to exercise is something terrible and wonderful. St. Charles inclined his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. You gave me absolute authority in the matter, and I used it well. And what if you had abused it? The Duke countered, his tone probing. That would have been impossible, St. Charles replied, his voice steady, for such a course would ruin me. The Duke leaned back, his gaze narrowing as he considered the man's words. How is it that men endowed with such faculties are found employing them in so lowly a sphere? St. Charles's expression remained impassive, but his voice took on a bitter edge. Everything is against our rising above it. We protect our protectors, we learn too many honorable secrets, and are kept in ignorance of too many shameful ones to be liked by people. We render such important services to others that they can only shake off the obligation by speaking ill of us. People think that things are only words with us, refinement is thus mere silliness, honor a sham, and acts of treachery mere diplomacy. We are the confidants of many who yet leave us much to guess at. Our program consists in thinking and acting, finding out the past from the present, ordering and arranging the future in the pettiest details, as I am about to, and, in short, in doing 100 things that might strike dismay to a man of no mean ability. When once our end is gained, words become things once more, and people begin to suspect that possibly we are infamous scoundrels. The Duke's lips twitched, a grudging acknowledgment of the truth in St. Charles's words. There may be some justice in all this, he conceded, but I do not suppose you expect to change the opinion of the world, or even mine. St. Charles's eyes gleamed with a quiet defiance. I should be a great fool if I did. I don't care about changing another man's opinion. What I do want to change is my own position." The Duke's tone was laced with faint mockery. "According to you, that would be very easy, wouldn't it?" "Why not, Your Grace?" St. Charles replied, his voice rising with ambition. "Let someone set me to play the spy over cabinets, instead of raking up the secrets of private families. Instead of dogging the footsteps of shady characters, let them put me in charge of the craftiest diplomats. Instead of pandering to the vilest passions, let me serve the government. I should be delighted to play a modest part in a great movement. And what a devoted servant Your Grace would have in me." The Duke studied him, his mind weighing the detective's audacity against his utility. "I am really sorry to employ such talents as yours in so petty an affair, my friend," he said, his tone measured, "but it will give me an opportunity of testing, and then we'll see." St. Charles's eyes flickered with calculation. "Ah, we shall see?" That means all has already been seen, he thought, sensing the Duke's guarded promise for what it was, a law to ensure his loyalty. The Duke's voice grew brisk, his thoughts turning to his immediate concerns. "I wish to see my son married. To Mademoiselle Inez de Christoval, Princess d'Argos, a good match." St. Charles interjected, his knowledge of the matter startlingly precise. "Her father made the mistake of entering Joseph Bonaparte's service and was banished by King Ferdinand. He probably took part in the Mexican Revolution." The Duke's expression tightened, a mixture of surprise and irritation at the detective's uncanny insight. The salon, with its polished surfaces and hidden currents, seemed to close in around them, a fitting stage for their game of power and deception. St. Charles, with his ambitions laid bare, stood ready to prove his worth, while the Duke, ever the strategist, saw in him a tool to unravel his wife's secrets, and perhaps a threat to be closely watched. In the Montsorel mansion, where every word was a gambit and every alliance precarious, the dance of intrigue had taken a dangerous new turn. In the gilded salon of the Montsorel mansion, the Duc de Montsorel and the Chevalier de St. Charles stood locked in a verbal duel, their words weaving a tapestry of intrigue as delicate as it was dangerous. The morning light cast sharp shadows across the room, mirroring the undercurrents of mistrust that flowed between them. The Duke, his florid face a mask of calculated composure, weighed every syllable from the detective, whose sharp eyes and measured tone betrayed a mind honed for exploitation. The air was thick with the scent of wax and ambition, and the heavy damask curtains seemed to guard their secrets as jealously as the men themselves. The Duke's voice was smooth but edged with curiosity. "Madame de Christoval and her daughter have made the acquaintance of a certain adventurer named Raoul de Fresques," St. Charles interjected, his precision startling. The Duke's eyebrows rose, a flicker of irritation crossing his features. "Is there nothing I can tell you that you do not know?" St. Charles's lips curved into a faint, deferential smile. "If your Grace desires it, I will know nothing." "On the contrary," the Duke replied, his tone sharpening, "I should like you to speak out, so that I may know what secrets you will permit us to keep." St. Charles inclined his head, his voice measured but bold. "Let us make one stipulation. Whenever my frankness displeases your Grace, call me Chevalier, and I will sink once more into my humble role of paid detective." The Duke's eyes glinted with amusement, though his thoughts remained guarded. "Go on, my friend," he said, then added to himself, "These people are very amusing." St. Charles's tone grew confident, his words carefully chosen. "Monsieur de Fresques will not be an adventurer so long as he lives in the style of a man who has an income of 100,000 francs. Whoever he is," the Duke said, his voice firm, "you must pierce through the mystery which surrounds him." St. Charles's expression grew serious, his voice tinged with caution. "Your Grace requires a very difficult thing. We are obliged to use circumspection in dealing with foreigners. They are our masters, they have turned Paris upside down." "That's the trouble," the Duke exclaimed, his frustration evident. St. Charles's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing an opportunity. "Does your grace belong to the opposition?" The Duke's voice was measured, revealing little. "I should like to have brought back the king without his following, that is my position." St. Charles nodded, his mind cataloguing the Duke's political leanings. The departure of the king resulted from the disorganization of the magnificent Asiatic police created by Bonaparte. An effort is being made nowadays to form a police of respectable people, a procedure which disbands the old police. Hemmed in by the military police of the invasion, we dare not arrest anyone, for fear we might lay hands on some prince on his way to keep an assignation, or some margrave who had dined too well. But for your grace, a man will attempt the impossible." He paused, then ventured, "Has this young man any vices? Does he play?" "Yes, in a social way," the Duke replied. "Does he cheat?" St. Charles pressed, his tone probing. The Duke's voice grew sharp. "Chevalier!" St. Charles bowed slightly, retreating with a practiced air of contrition. "This young man must be very rich." "Inquire for yourself," the Duke said, his tone dismissive. "I ask pardon of your grace," St. Charles continued, undeterred, "but people without passions cannot know much. Would you have the goodness to tell me whether this young man is sincerely attached to Mademoiselle de Christoval?" The Duke's face tightened, alarm flashing in his eyes. "What? That princess? That heiress? You alarm me, my friend." St. Charles's voice took on a sly edge. "Has not your grace told me that he is a young man? Now, pretended love is more perfect than genuine love, that is the reason why so many women are deceived. Undoubtedly he has thrown over many mistresses, and heart-free, tongue-free, you know." "Take care," the Duke interrupted, his voice a low warning. "Your mission is peculiar, and you had best not meddle with the women. An indiscretion on your part may forfeit my goodwill, for all that relates to Monsieur Frescas must go no further than you and myself. I demand absolute secrecy, both from those you employ and those who employ you. In fact, you will be a ruined man if Madame de Montsorel has any suspicion of your designs." St. Charles's eyes flickered with calculation, his mind seizing on the mention of the Duchess. "Is Madame de Montsorel then interested in this young man? I must keep an eye on her, for this girl is her chambermaid." The Duke's expression grew stern, his voice cold. "Chevalier de St. Charles, to order you to do this would be unworthy of me, and to ask for such an order is quite unworthy of you.